Onde tem cultura, a Vale está. No poder criativo que nasce dos palcos, orquestras, das artes, das ruas e dos museus. Na valorização das diversas identidades brasileiras e na preservação de memórias. É valorizando a cultura que crescemos e evoluímos juntos. Instituto Cultural Vale.
Ministério da Cultura e a Associação Casa Azul apresentam 22ª FLIP, Festa Literária Internacional de Paraty. A FLIP conta com benefício da Lei Federal de Incentivo à Cultura, PRONAC 235060, e possui acessibilidade para pessoas com deficiências física, visual e auditiva. Tem patrocínio Master, Instituto Cultural Vale. Patrocínio Ouro, Itaú, CCR e Suzano. Patrocínio Prata, MAC Móveis, Eletronuclear, O Globo e Sesc. Patrocínio Bronze, Sebrae e Globo Livros. Parceria institucional, Prefeitura de Paraty, Secretaria Estadual de Turismo do Rio de Janeiro e Museu do Território. É uma concepção Associação Casa Azul. Realização, Ministério da Cultura, Governo Federal, Brasil, União e Reconstrução. Obrigada e boa mesa. FLIP, o encontro da literatura com a cidade.
Então, eu comecei a fazer artesanato há 34 anos atrás. Eu moro no Quilombo e no Quilombo tem, né, tem esse tipo de trabalho, né? Eu aprendi alguma coisa com as amigas, outras coisas eu fui criando, né? Até chegar no ponto que eu comecei a fazer para vender. Foi criação minha. Eu bolei a galinha e deu certo. Eu acho o meu movimento com a rua maravilhoso. Eu adoro, entendeu? Eu tenho um público bom. Hoje até trabalhei em loja, né? Eu já trabalhei ali, eu trabalho na loja, mas eu dou preferência na rua. Com toda a dificuldade, com todo o trabalho que dá, mas eu prefiro trabalhar na rua. Eu acho que o meu trabalho é mais visto na rua do que na loja, entendeu? Não pode, eu acho que artesanato é cultura, né? E cultura é Paraty. Paraty é a cultura. Então, eu aconselho assim, as pessoas que são artesãos, dar continuidade aos trabalhos deles. Então, igual eu estou dando no meu, eu não pretendo parar.
Flip, o encontro da literatura com a cidade.
I hope you are excited for this roundtable. This is roundtable 3. From Dust We Came. We have our writer from Cameroon's Léonora and Alves and Eliana Cruz, these amazing writers, and they talk about the diaspora, each one in their own side of the diaspora, about this space and what happens in this space where they came from. And also, as Sima's yesterday in the opening session, this is a space of pain, suffering, but also a space for creation and joy. To mediate this roundtable, I would like to invite Adriana Ferreira Silva. She's almost a Flip partner, and she's a leader of the Union of Mediators. She's very well organized. She's a journalist. She writes at Nexo, and she's a contributor to 451. She's one of the main voices to talk about very respect about contemporary literature. Adriana, please. Good morning to all those here present today, all our union members. I would like to invite to join me Léonora Miano and Eliana Alves Cruz to join me on stage. In the beginning of the 20th century, in the midst of all the discussions between intellectual Afro-descended Africans, writers in the U.S. about the paths that Black people or Black writers should take, the writer Zora Neale Hurston was confronted with different accusations from her own peers, because supposedly she was trying to entertain white readers by describing the details of a first orgasm of her character, Janie. This was a Black woman that not only had orgasms in the in the pages of that book, but also she was able to find her redemption for all the violence she suffered with a man that was much younger than she was. Regarding this criticism, she said, to reduce a nation within a nation, and more than half of it is of women, to one single Black identity is to hide the absolute complexity of the Black experience and of the human experience itself. It is from this complexity and from this fascinating experience that the work of Eliana Alves Cruz, Leonora Miano come from. In novels, essays, plays, the characters created by both authors will express their individualities in reports or stories that will have to do with everything: how to romanticize enslavement, the color fetish, the colorism as a shortcut for narratives, and all the different artifices that are present in international literature. Eliana Alves Cruz was born in 1966. She's a journalist, a scriptwriter, a presenter. She started with Agua de Barrela by the Mali Publishing House in 2016, talking about the story of her family. And the book won the Oliveira Silveira Award of the Palmares Cultural Foundation, and then O Crime do Caso Valongo in 2018, and Nada Digo de Ti in 2020, A Vestida in 2022, and Solitária, also a novel from 2022. Through her essays in A Vestida, she won the greatest award, Jabuti, in Brazil, in essays. She also writes a children's book. She has texts published in different anthologies of essays and poetry. She's a presenter of Ilha das Letras and also a columnist in the newspaper, Nexo. So, well, applauses to Eliana, her amazing work. Léonora Miano was born in 1973 in Douala, in Cameroon, in the sub-Saharan Africa. And she spent her childhood and teenage years surrounded by film, books, and wanting to be the star of a musical inspired by Hollywood musicals. Well, she was not. She did not become an actress, but she became a jazz and blues singer. And this is how she went to France in 1991. However, with a small child, she ended up changing the stages for writing, and this is just for our luck, for our benefit. Since her first book, launched in 2005, she has won many awards. For this book, she won 6 awards, among them the Prix de Premier Roman de Femme. After that, she launched more than 24 books, among novels, essays, plays, where topics such as sexuality, pleasure, transatlantic traffic, Pan-Africanism, religion, colonialism, feminism, and whiteness, among many other topics that has made of her one of the most well-known intellectuals in the world. Here in Brazil, we have some of her books published and translated, and we hope that we will have even more after she came here to visit us. All her books will be published here. So there is Contours of the Coming Day in a free translation. It was published here in Brazil. Season of the Shadow, translated into English. And now, with her coming to Flip, we are launching the other, L'autre langue des femmes, the other languages of women, also in a free translation, where she champions the organization of sub-Saharan women to deal with Western feminism. Also, Rouge Impératrice, Red Empress, in a free translation, and Stardust, a book that is a self-autobiography where she will talk about the period in which she lived with her small daughter in a women's shelter in Paris. Léonora, since 2019, lives in Togo, where she also sings, writes, and has a publishing house called the Quilombo Publishing. Congratulations, Léonora, for all your amazing work. I would like to kick off our presentation a little bit with the title of our conversation, From Dust We Came. And will bring me the multiplicity of experiences of African people and their different diaspora, and also their descendants, which, of course, are part of your work that will fill in gaps, that will help us understand the structure of contemporary society, as well as idealizing radically different futures. So I would like to know what are the gaps you're trying to fulfill. Maybe we'll start with Eliana.
Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, actually. It's a huge pleasure to be here at Flip today in this wonderful debate, symbolic debate. It's emblematic. It's so important for our debate in Brazil, our national debate. We began with the opening talking about João do Rio, this writer, the journalist. He visited this city, covering this city, portraying the reality of the various diverse Brazils. My concerns come from a lot of gaps. They emerge from a lot of voids which were produced, voids that were intentionally implemented. It's a kind of solitude, loneliness, which is cultivated. This solitude, it's a political project. It's a political project for Brazil to keep us apart from our history. It's a project, as Luis Antonio Simas said yesterday, we need to make it go wrong. And literature was the entry. It was the place where I found this space to begin to implode this national project that's been so successful in Brazil, which is that of having us lose ourselves. We forget who we are. We are lost in the mists of time. So whenever I sit down to write, I ask for permission because I believe in that. I ask permission and I ask, what do I need to write now? What do I want to write now? It's not what the market wants or what the fashion dictates or trends say, but how am I going to tell this story? What do I need to tell in this story? What do I intend to do with it? So, but this is a concern that never ceases. It's kind of hunger that I cannot quell. It's thirst that we can't quench. And this propels me forward in my writing. That's what, it's my fuel, this restlessness and this void, this anguish is what propels us forward and drives us forward. This desire for joy, this desire for a full life with a full cycle in life. Léonora?
I was thinking about being unrestful. So we were based on this. I was thinking about reviewing a bit my what I was able to write, and I guess I have to answer certain issues, but not on the concern on this distress. And as a woman, sub-Saharan woman, I was raised in an environment where everybody looks like me, and where I will represent the majority. And as such, I project myself in a very spontaneous manner, where everything that can have everything that has to do with the experience of being a human being. In my experience, when I talk about human condition, it's the human condition in my novels, and with a Afro-descendant African face. And when giving this Afro-descendant face, I'm also obliged to go back to what are the specificities of the experiences of this human category that will therefore create a very specific point of view in a very specific way of living in the universal condition of mankind or human beings. And this is what I do in my novels. And what I try to do is to restitute to the rest of humanity that has lost its ability to recognize itself in every human being. I will restitute this African feature, the fraternity between us, something that is, of course, essential to mankind or humankind. And also, I will tell stories that, if they are specific to Afro-descendants and Africans in general, because they will come from the colonization, from slavery and racialization, and even racialization itself. I believe that it has to do with everyone, and it has to do with everything that humanity is losing and creating the world in which we live in. So it is interesting to get to know what it is, to understand it, and to understand how this will influence different trajectories. So that is why I believe, at least today, we are all in the same boat, so to speak, and it is impossible to consider a future if if we are not all of us contributing, if we believe that only some of us will be excluded in terms of how we go forward. So unless all of us contribute, so we have to recreate this territory of humanity. And I try to do this through the way I work. And I hope your questions will allow me to be more specific about this.
Yesterday, during the opening, Luis Antonio Sima said a beautiful thing about the degree to which the projects like that of the slave trade, African slave trade, destroys communities, it destroys cultures, and the diaspora, meanwhile, rebuilds. Léonora, in the dark heart of the night, or in the transatlantic trade, precisely the season of the shadow, from the perspective of those who had no idea of what was happening. People were being kidnapped and enslaved. You tell in the season of the shadow. I would like to hear what led you to tell this story, and also concerning, in this book, you already give us clues of what begins to be built based on this first destruction.
Yes, the origin of this novel is very simple. It comes from this gap, this missing. I wanted to write a novel that that was missing in me, and this is a topic that has interested me for many years. Not only on this topic, but also how the diaspora, how the African descendants live around the world. So through my raising, my youth, I tried to rebuild or to give to rebuild this African body that is dispersed around the world due to the slave trade, especially. Therefore, the colonial slavery or enslavement. So for some time, I have understood that in all conversations that we are able to have on this topic, all the different novels that are written, all the films we write, there is always a story that is missing. And this story that is missing is that only Africa can tell. It's not a matter of trade. It is a family history. It is a story of people who were the family of those who were taken. Because when we talk about all the enslavement, when we talk about enslaved people, the first ones that were taken, and we never say that they belong to a family. We never say that they came from a community, that people knew their names, that people knew the sound of their voices, that they had a role in that community. And there were beings that loved them, and that after they left, missed them. So in my novels, I try to tell a story where we don't even know why the people disappear. It is a small village that is all of a sudden hit by a tragedy. There is a fire, and throughout this fire, there are teenagers that will disappear, and we don't know why. We don't know who has taken them. We don't even know if people have taken them. We don't know what happened. So I wanted to talk about this. I wanted to talk about the pain of those that stayed behind and those that were never able to understand why or where their loved ones left. So I wanted to find out this, something that would go beyond that moment that they needed to understand. So I needed to write the story because I had the impression that when we talk about all of this, there is a side that is very sensitive in terms of the African experience that we never mentioned. When you talk about Africa, we, of course, have talked about those that have collaborated into the crime, those who have traded people, people that were not of that community, but can be considered Africans later on. We cannot consider that there were Africans before Europeans decided that we were Africans. This is a name that is not created by us. It's not autochthonous. There were not people in Africa that considered themselves as Africans or even black. Everything all those that have arrived, for instance, in Brazil, considered as Africans. They were Yoruba, they were Bantu, they were something else, but not African and black. This was something that was put on them. So when we talk about the transatlantic or transocean trade, we talk about the African side, and those have also collaborated in the crime. And we don't talk about the majority, the simple people, the people that have lost their dear ones. So most of the inhabitants of that continent of that were not powerful people, were not people that their opinions were given or asked for. These were people that to whom these things had happened, and they were even unable to know to which extent that would become massive. They have lived in the scale of their own individuality, and they had disappeared with their own feelings, being unable to reconcile these feelings. So this is in the shadow. This is what we try to tell. The season of the shadow is how to survive within this tragedy.
Just a message now. There are slips of paper circulating in the tent and out on the town square. You can ask the questions. They'll reach me in due time. Eliana, you meanwhile, in laundry water, agua de bajela, the characters could very well be the people that were kidnapped in the season of the shadow, with a further characteristic, which is that yesterday Simas highlighted that the fact that all of the people had been mixed when they reached Brazil. So based on this, something that could only you could tell, I would like for you to talk about, based on this mixture of peoples, what were the paths that you trod to reach Agua de Bajela? Okay, fine. I think this debate is fascinating because while Léonora says that people who stayed and they were family, I am in Agua de Bajela talking about people who reached here and formed families here in Brazil. On this side, they formed families based on belonging from the place where their origins. They made the Atlantic crossing, but people that made their families here and raised them based on the need, and the profound desire to love and be loved. I think that Agua de Bajela is a book which portrays the path of my family itself, the story. It's a fiction based on a real story of my ancestors. Most of those characters actually existed in the flesh, and a major portion of them I knew myself, in the stories that were passed down from one generation to the next, the words that navigated across time. They maintained these ties these family ties. It's much more than a book about this dilaceration of the diaspora. It's a book of reconstruction and that of reconnection with the continent and with these people that stayed behind. It is something fascinating for me that today in 2024, on October 10, we're here in this tent rebuilding these ties in the Roundtable on Literature, because I have a friend once told me the word is everything from us. We are Yorubas, and I can see my ancestry in Yoruba. I can glimpse it in Yoruba. I can see it and I can glimpse it because this word was preserved by people, the elders who passed down this legacy to me. Agua de Bajela, literally translated as laundry water. It moves people that actually don't belong to Africa or don't have this in their family stories or ancestral stories, because at some point we can see that trait which is common to all of us, namely the tie with others next to us, whom we call family, even though they are part of blood ties. It's something that inherent to all of us, men and women. There's an ugly word in Brazil, which I think a lot of ugly words exist in Brazil. First, Fulano has if Fulano was born in a golden cradle, why isn't he well bred? Is that an economic trait or poverty? What is that? A person is not well bred. What does that mean? We need to cleanse the family. We need to cleanse the womb. We need to cleanse the blood. If there's a clean womb, it's because there's a dirty womb. Where, at what time was this indecency established here in Brazil to the point that we verbalize this for others? What does that mean? So this violence, cleansing the blood, cleansing the womb, which are often much more cruel than physical violence, because there are things that leave wounds and scars for decades on decades, generations and generations. I think that only art can untie this knot. Literature, the force, the strength of words told because we have the power to build a future. We conjure the future. We conjure it's a word, conjure. Conjuration has the magic of weaving a future. We're here today weaving the future, conjuring up the future. Whenever we make literature, we fabulate the future. And so it's what Agua de Bahela is based on. Agua de Bahela, it's my life that came before the book, not specifically because of the words, obviously, the words and the stories that are told in the book, and the preservation of those family facts, but especially because it brought to me all of a family that I didn't even know existed, bloodlines, blood family members that I discovered through the book, and people who came to us because of the book itself. I don't know my family tree. I don't know who my grandparents were. I don't know who were my parents. So I'm going to adopt your family because that's the story. It could be my story. I've heard this so many times, and that's so common. I hear that from readers, and this is so common in Brazil. We have this past that's been erased, totally erased and effaced, and I believe this is very African. I think it's an African legacy, this notion of extended family, this notion that we have something in common and that stitches us together and unites us and binds us together. So it's a bridge. It's a great bridge and a very fortunate bridge that Flip has done here. And I hope that it will be expanded and amplified, because the time has come. Africa is a continent. It's a mysterious continent for Brazil. And it's alarming that it be like that, because everyone here has Africa in themselves. And how can it be that we know nothing about Mozambique, Angola, Nigeria, and all their history, and Senegal? How is it that we don't know anything? Can we know more about European history than African history? This is unthinkable. It's a scandal. So we're breaking these chains here today, actually. Eliana, in this context, both your novels and novels by Léonora, they deal with, amongst other themes, what is the importance in the relationship of love in this context? Okay, love. Without love, we don't live, and we have a population that is worked on the lack of love. It pains me to see how black men are seen in Brazil and in the world. Their mutilated bodies, they're not seen with love. Abel Books already said that it's nothing new for me. Bell Hooks, but it's alarming how this lack of love perpetuates a state of things in practice in life. When we have this inner void and this lack of connection to other people, and without amorous ties, we're brutalized like animals, and we need to reclaim this. It's like a cliche, and sometimes it's very close to us. Sometimes we only need to access to open up the door, which is kind of locked because we have a media which incentivizes tragedy and lack of love, and it doesn't give us any solutions. In the media, social networks, we're navigating in hate, and hate is sterile. Hate doesn't build anything. It only generates raw material, which is mourning and grief. All this legacy, the slaveholding legacy, and everything that we already know, right? The slaveholding legacy has this power to have a curtain over our eyes and people's hearts, that we aren't able to glimpse other people with loving eyes. We're unable to see in other people the possibility of a turnaround in their life, of actually being fulfilled as a human beings. So I believe that not only Agua de Bajera, but other books that I've written, they have this basically of curiosity of who is this person that I used to see in a given way. This is true for me because we're not exempt from our own times. We're not exempt and immune to everything of all these issues that traverse us. But for myself, I have to look at people. I have to look at myself sometimes in the mirror. Who are you after all? So this exercise of who we are is an excellent exercise to do in writing and reading, in exchange with others of stories that we do. I have attempted to do this exercise myself. Léonora, your books also have, a lot of them have love, especially now talking about the ones launched in Brazil, Red Empress, and I would like to hear you about the importance of reading these relationships in your novels. And in addition, afterward, I'd like you to tell us about the women's body, because women in your novels, women grasp their own bodies, they take possession of their own bodies, they feel pleasure, they desire, and they establish the direction, the relationship. So I'd like you to talk about these two characteristics.
I will try to answer, but first, so that I won't forget, I would like to say that Eliana, that when she should come whenever she wants to find out Africa. I would like to invite her to come to Togo to revisit Africa. She already has a home in my home. My house is your house. So it would be wonderful to have her, to allow her to rediscover Africa. But I guess we have to work together, Eliana and I, and we have to create among sub-Saharan Africans and Afro-descendants these links that will be of love and not of suffering. We have many links in terms of connections through suffering, but we have to do it through love. Love is important in my books because I believe the category that we call Black, the sub-Saharan Africans and their descendants in the whole world. This category, this humankind category, was hurt, was re-signified, and very frequently was left behind. She was not allowed to have all this interpretation of ourselves. We have saturated the view of our spectators with this image, this disruptive image of what it is to be Black. And we have all forgotten that there was inwardly the same resources that other humans have in other areas. So my novels work about what is within, about the emotions, about the thoughts, about the feelings of our different characters, because that is where we belong. This is what makes us universal. This is what allows us to share with all other human beings what we are. But it's also the territory that we have to own, because this was taken from us through history. If we talk about colonization and enslavement, we talk about a situation in which love has become transgressive, complicated, because it was denied to us, because we are just in a state of survival. And many times we are under conditions that will make loving a risk. life-threatening. You were taken from the ones you loved from one day to the next, and then you understand that in order to protect yourself, you don't want to be linked to anyone. You don't want to love anyone, and so to love someone regardless, and which is exactly what people have done. To have to love regardless, to be attached to someone regardless. It is also a mechanism of resistance, spiritual resistance, that we never describe it as such. So we have to talk about it as a mechanism of resistance. So our work as novel writers is to describe love, to give love to ourselves, to put our characters in ourselves, and to place our characters in situations that we will feel good, in a situation where we are able to see ourselves with desire, but also with well-being. And this is important because this will not come from the outside in. We have to have ownership. We have to restitute ourselves. So it is important to have love in our texts. I dislike, for instance, that love as creation power, that love will be just a reparation, that beautiful, illuminating love is sometimes left behind, left out of sub-Saharan writers. We have to have sexual pleasure, but it's sometimes troublesome. It will be love that is taken, sometimes a bit dirty love, as if we had not a right to this other love, to this beautiful, illuminating love. So this is what I want to see, and this is what we see in Rouge Impératrice, read in Empress in a free translation. This is a bit transgression at different levels, because in this novel, Africa is not what it is in the imagination of the rest of the world. It is a powerful Africa, not only a powerful Africa, but it also allows itself to have a beautiful, blissful love, passionate love by characters that I wanted. They're almost perfect. They are beautiful, they're powerful, and they are aware of their strength, of what they can project into the world. And very well. So in order for a novel to work, you have to have an opposition. So love will find opposition. But what mattered to me was this. It is to show this Africa that will embed powerful and love. Power and love. And this is something that wasn't done before. And to me, it was essential. I'm writing the sequel, because now I believe in order to renew this imagery, we have to propose this type of storytelling. We cannot be limited by saying that, well, we are all human beings, we're all equal, and that we have the same rights and this and that. We have to show it. We have to show it to people. We have to be bold enough to show it. And even if while showing it, it should, for instance, tamper or take power from those who currently have power. And so novels are capable of doing that, because this powerful Africa will ask itself about its own destiny, about the destiny of a whole community of European descendants, where we have no idea what to do because they're poor. There are these people who have to care for, and we are unable to include them in local culture. Should we keep them or not? Should we chase them out? So what are we going to do about these people? So Rouge Impératrice is a way of rethinking the world, to ask ourselves of what we are currently living, what are the relationships we have between ourselves, what are the future that we want to build together or not. And so this is an important feature. At a certain time, we think that the extreme right is, blossoming all over the world, and the temptation to have an identity power has been solidified around the world. So if we allow this tendency to dominate us, what will be the future of the world? what is the future that we have in our path? And if we have other choices, what would be the possibilities? Therefore, I think we have to write maybe a trilogy to answer all these issues, all these questions. So Red Empress is the first book of this trilogy about the future.
There's a characteristic in Red Empress, which in 2100 Africa, people have, there's a language which mixes various different languages. I'd like for you to talk a little bit about this research that you did in this writing, where you don't make any concessions. You follow, I would imagine that it's very close to your daily experience, right?
Well, it's very simple, actually, because since this novel passes in the future, is set in the future, and it will have Africa that has recovered its power, economic power, military power, political power, but also it is identity power, this ability to decide its aesthetics, its spirituality, in a way that how it is going to give back after having lived everything that it has lived. So to create this space, to me, is also a way of creating a new language, because I create much different territory, the aesthetics of this territory, and new ethnicities. We see the old ethnicities with a relation with the diaspora we see in my book. So there's the diaspora also in this novel. It is in the territory, it's in the aesthetics, in the rhetoric. So we had to create a language. And what would be the language of a sovereign Africa, freed from the clutches of colonialism, and marching ahead towards its own destiny? So what would be the language of such an Africa, other than a language that will bring together different sub-Saharan languages? Therefore, the text is written in French, but it's true that in the French edition, I put a vocabulary that is brought from different languages in the African continent, in order to name, for instance, the transportation means, the train that goes through the cities, different objects, clothes, and to name a number of things that will make African culture even more present in the text. And that will, of course, in my opinion, will add to this desire of being sovereign in all areas. That will allow us to imagine that it is possible, to reach a cultural embracing between Africans that will produce beauty. This cultural embracing between Africans is something that has to do with me, because it is something that is already in march and between the different sub-Saharan African countries. What we share today is the colonial experience, but we are not mutually influenced on a cultural plan. For instance, I can love, for instance, maybe a cultural practice of Mali, but it doesn't mean that I'm going to import it to Togo or Cameroon. So we only import extra African cultures, but we can be mutually inspired. Our continent is so rich culturally, spiritually, and also its different aesthetics, and that we are sometimes unable to understand why are not we together to fabricate something different, but maybe to invent something different and something that could be brought to the world, proposed to the world. It is a way of also responding or answering to the question, if Africa was to be powerful tomorrow, what would be its role in the world? What would be its way of exercising its power? Let's say if tomorrow we are we become powerful. Would we be African imperialists like we had European imperialists? Are we going to want to enslave other cultures? And if we don't want to do this, what are we going to do? What are we going to propose in this powerful Africa? So to consider Africa and its future would also allow us to reflect on this, and it is important to start doing exactly that.
Eliana, talking about language, still, you come from a lineage of Brazilian writers, beginning with Maria Firmina dos Reis, who was the first woman to write a novel in Brazil. She received a tribute 2 years ago, first one to talk about memories of people that had been kidnapped in Africa. Ruth Guimarães, Maria de Jesus, Ana Maria Gonçalves, Miriana Alves, Conceição Evaristo, and continues with you. All these Black women writers, thinking of that and based a little bit on this legacy that we have in language, how do you situate yourself and what interests you to work on in the language and your novels? This is a very difficult issue in Brazil because we have ways of speaking and telling that are very different. It's a huge territory, Brazil, and all bound together by the Portuguese language. This is an ongoing discussion. Brazilian Portuguese, we say Brazilian Portuguese, other kinds of Portuguese, but there are various different kinds of Portuguese in Brazil, but in our language and our way of speaking, our way of writing, all of these marks that we have, Lélia Gonçalves discussed with in Black Portuguese. I think to myself now that we also need to overcome this wall, because sometimes it's obvious that literature is aesthetics. Of course, it's not just content, but the way and the form that you tell, the semantic choices that make, the way that you stitch the text stain and mark on the page. All of this matters. It's part of the content. But there are some things that traverse and permeate all of our reality. And this curtain of regional language or things that of our jargons, various different jargons in Brazil sometimes act as an impediment, like a barrier, an obstacle. I write this way, I speak this way. This is the way that I stitch my sentences together. Sometimes this blocks the text. I think I try to free myself. I'm from Rio. I'm a carioca. My father is from Bahia. My mother's all my family's from Bahia. It's a big mixture. Coming from Bahia, and my grandparents, for example, and my maternal grandmother, a lot of things from Minas. I don't know why she used this expression, and she was Bahian. And sometimes the way people moved around and that added other things to their own languages, and I am unable sometimes to control that. It comes out when I write naturally. When you put it in the characters' mouths, you try to give them a different kind of voice. Do you identify this is so and so who's talking? This is other so and so speaking now. So this is fun to write about this way too, to investigate what kind of inner voice that character has, and when we find the character's inner voice, we end up understanding how they actually speak. So I think it's important for investigate what comes from inside for us to determine what comes out externally. In A Solitária, my novel, there's a character from the state of Pará, and I included just a few things from Pará in northern Brazil at the mouth of the Amazon. And in the way that people use the singular and the plural that the people from Pará use. And this little bit was fun and pleasurable to see myself in the thou, the second person singular. This is fascinating, like people use from the state of Pará. This, you make a bridge and a connection with just 2 words to include that in the character. And you have a character within a universe with just a few things. You can situate them in that kind of universe with a few details. I've been interested in investigating what is inside that character and what the externalize in their way of speaking and verbalize it. And this is very complex, especially when we write novels, historical novels, for example. And I see nothing of you. I say nothing of you that I don't see in you as a trans person from the 18th century, at a time when a lot of people talked língua geral. It was a mixture of Tupi-Guarani and Portuguese. It was like a common language. It's difficult to rebuild that, but there are a few positions and words and stances that carry you to the past. This is sufficient to have the reader, the person sees themselves in that character. Strategically, it's something that we bind and stitch the text together for people to take this time travel, but they're not stuck with in the purism. But this character would never say that. Of course not, because he's being written in the 21st century, right? Even though it was a trans person in the 18th century, we need to extract and extrapolate sometimes to abstractly for us to flow in writing itself. This is fascinating. This book, I say nothing of you that I don't see in you. But would that character have existed in the 18th century? Why? It's difficult to think that there would not be a trans person in the 18th century. Of course, these people have always existed. This is based on research that I did, but that character is there and is very contemporary, and at the same time is not contemporary, not current. So this, when people feel disconcerted by that, it's great. Talking about the lineage of wonderful women writers that you belong to, a characteristic of both of your books is that in general, the main characters are normally women that reclaim their bodies. They have a relationship with motherhood, which black women, which was denied to them, and also their different forms of organization. What did you discover creating the characters in your books concerning these organizations of women in Brazil? What are the themes that interest you to deal with in literature based on these discoveries? Look, I discovered something that was fascinating. I have a family which sometimes they don't apologize, but they give you a cake. They don't say, they give you a present or they bake a cake for it. They don't apologize, but they make up in other ways. Sometimes, since the word and this right to certain things were denied to us, people translated these into gestures, and it was beautiful to discover that. Sometimes we just talked about words and language, and sometimes we're stuck to the words, and we don't see that the gestures and acts tell a story as well. The gestures and acts are words as well. It's storytelling with gestures. My women in my family told me it was beautiful to see that I couldn't see that story because I was stuck to the words. I wanted for them to apologize to me. I wanted for her to tell this, that, or the other. And they were telling me that in other ways with gestures. Sometimes one time I had an interesting conversation with my maternal grandmother, and she said to me, I had done something, and she said, my maternal grandmother, "Don't you regret doing that?" And I said, "No, I don't regret it at all." And she looked at me sideways and said, "Okay, fine. You're a woman of your time. I'm a woman of my time." My grandmother said, "What did she mean by that?" "I accept what you have done, although I don't agree with it. I'm here with you. Nevertheless, you're a woman of your own time, and I'm a woman of my own time." That's the point. It's a kind of connection beyond what is said. So I discovered this. Made me discover the planning that they did, not for me, but for the future generations, not for me specifically, which gave us the right to so many things, even though that was not for them. So what were they, did they tell me? It was a lesson for me in detachment, a lesson of the future, and a great lesson for us. We need to think life beyond ourselves. We're very self-centered, and that is why the planet is being destroyed, because we only think of here and now. We don't think of the future generations. We never think of the future generations. If we did, we would not have so many problems with fossil fuels. So to think of life beyond yourself is a grandeur and selflessness when I discovered that, I said, that's beautiful, that map, such a beautiful map. This present, this gift, I discovered this. It made me discover not only my own family, but in all families. And it is something which I am still investigating, which I'm still studying, because we talk about strength, because the black women and the history and everything, that's cool, of course, but it's where is our weakness? Where is our right to be tired once in a while? What about that place that we only know when we close the door and lay our heads on the pillow? To have this kind of voyeur of ourselves is great. And it's great to work with this in literature. Léonora. Talking about organizations of women's and lineages in the other women's other language, freely translated, it's being launched here in Brazil. You have a counterweight with the contradictions, not only traditions, but also the action of some women from various different places in the African continent to feminism. And you have a critique of the attempt to have these women be labeled as feminists. I'd like for you to talk a little bit about your conclusions that you reached, considering that you are a super feminist yourself.
Well, I'm not sure if I'm a super feminist, but people want me to declare as such, and I don't do it. But before I answer, I would like to say that I'll say why I don't want to declare myself as a feminist, and this will be the beginning of my answer to the question you have raised. I am a proud African woman. I come from the first continent, birth of mankind, of humankind, and I don't see why, if we have to reflect about a political doctrine that will refer to women's emancipation, talk about women's power. We, as African women, we have to use this kind of vocabulary. We have to be our first reference. We shouldn't borrow this vocabulary. So we should be the first reference to all those who pretend themselves to be feminists. I know it's going to be difficult to applaud, because when I talk about this, people don't like it very much. But I like to say what I think. I like to be candid. So. Western feminists that are sometimes imperialistic, that consider themselves universalists, and wish to speak on our behalf of all of us women and make also recommendations to all of us. And since I do not understand myself I don't see myself in each one of their rhetorics that they have African. If they don't have African references, they cannot be my own reference. And that's it. As simple as that. Yes, yes. And I feel very much at ease to say such, because, of course, we're not perfect as African women. We have created societies that are patriarchal societies, and women have suffered in these societies. We are the continent in which where women were trying to exercise for the first time political power. It was in Africa that this happened, when women were for the first time heading armies. It was in Africa. When women for the first time built cities, it was in Africa, so forth and so on. So we are the firsts everywhere. So that's it. I say that because we don't say this we are the first, because not because we were colonized and we were imposed as European human, that we did not lose our agency, that we should talk about ourselves as if we were nothing, as if we had nothing to contribute, and as if we weren't able also to teach this to others. So this is the project of l'autre langue des femmes, the other language of women, to start and reflect to start reflecting about this, of how we have African women characters from the past, and also women's practices in Africa that we had, for instance, in women's societies. How can we nurture our reflection currently? How should I put this? To enrich the weaponry, so to speak, of our activism, and how can everything help us? Like fiction has now helped us renew the image of Africa, and to better understand this, to consider the world history of women, but that will truly have a space for everyone. And I believe that we're not there yet. And I don't like the way African women are seen by others. I was born in that continent, and I believe that we are different, and we can talk differently. We are different. And what I like to propose, going to the extent of integrating in my Africanism, to have this representation of African women's power. Also, I'm part of the diaspora because the diaspora also has its place in history, not only because some of them were born and then taken from Africa, but also because I believe that it is a bit, just a little bit of the sub-Saharan African identity that they try to pass on to their descendants, more specifically when they try to, for instance, to include or to participate in liberation struggles. So I don't know. I can't remember exactly what the question was, but I hope I have answered it. Thank you. Thank you.
Reading your work, we talk here a lot about ancestrality, but reading your work and thinking of what you're saying here, of all these mixtures that happened and effacements, and in a sense, your work searches for this ancestrality. Do you think that it's possible to build ancestrality based on literature? To build ancestrality based on literature is what Saidi Hartman said, critical fabulation. Saidi Hartman said that we fabulate, but what could have happened, that could have happened. That woman, did she exist? She could have. She didn't, but she could have. She could have. Okay, so I think that we already have proper elements to rebuild some certain things and to stitch together these holes in all our past, and we have, and darning them. We have people with various different types of belonging, like Léonora, myself, Mohamed, Gassar, and so many authors, men and women. We kind of do that, darning the holes. We have this tapestry where we darn, stitch, and reweave our ancestrality, to combining what has been scattered, recombining things. It's the opposite movement in the counterclockwise in the diaspora. This is one of the most interesting movements, for me at least, in contemporary literature. It's one of the most magical movements, and mysterious movements, and mysteriously things are connecting in ways that are irreversible. It's there's no turning back. Rebuilding, and to bring these people to life, and not, we don't give them back their humanity, what is already ours. We just reveal this humanity because it already belongs to us. It already belongs to it. It always has these ancestrality. These people were here, in fact, and as if they said, tell us that we were here, and we are here. Tell them that what we did. Tell them that we did not help to Brazil, but we actually built each brick in this town and each brick in this country. We didn't help build it. We built it. This movement is somewhat continuity of all this. What about you, Leonora?
Yeah.
I believe that it is fair that we should recreate our ancestrality through literature. And I guess it's one of the only ways to do so. But beyond this recreation and all the critical fabrication, so to speak, I believe that in order to find it, find our ancestry, we, of course, start talking about them. And I trust in that. If we talk about it, I believe that we will be transversed. We will be, we will use this through our writing by beings that wish to say, well, I will be the voice of this ancestry that will speak through me. And it will be a rite of passage in our culture. And this happens in the creation. And when you prepare a text that you have written, you will understand that there are certain excerpts of this text that you did not think about conscientiously. You said, but that came to you, but you don't know when. And this happens also in our work. So I believe that those who truly try to find these voices of the past will urges them to come and to speak through you. And that will not only maybe provoke a certain manifestation of this ancestry, but also to rebuild a true rhetoric. I believe this is what happens in not only my book, but many other works. It's, everything is not just intellect in the word of writing. It's really to try to find people that came before us on Earth and that have not left enough history that we could work with. So they are somewhere around us. Just the fact that we need to retell the story, to me, that means that they are looking for us too. They're looking for a door. And these are people that dream about them, and they find that door for us to tell their stories. So it's a little bit irrational, it's a little bit intellectual, but it's also true. So I believe in that. I do believe that there's this dimension in our work, and that should be welcomed humbly. And it is a work that will take over us. And this is what I do. I do this. I will allow myself to be at the service of my ancestry. I allow them to take over and use me to convey their voices of the multitude of ancestors that came before me. I believe that I will bring them peace, because this is an issue we also have. We are peoples with have sufferance. We have suffering in our history, and so it matters. As Eliana said, it's important for us to retell the story. It matters to them that they be considered and talked about, and also and this story won't be complete, even if it's not fully exact in all the details and facts, but just the fact that it exists will allow us to, the spirits or the ancestry, to find peace and to continue their trajectory. So it is also a way of, checking one of the most important steps of grief that might have disappeared, and so we allow them to continue their way, their path. It's a bit of spiritual. This is also part of the literary creation work.
Quite unfortunately, we're wrapping up, so I want to thank you all. Wait a minute. Hold your horses. We have a surprise. I want to thank you all for attending, and thank our Ana Lima Cecilio to conduct this discussion, Léonora and Eliana for being so kind as having accepted my invitation afterwards as well. And we're going to close with a poem by Eliana. Great. From the dust we came. nothing will be left. It blows, alien to our childish dramas. They get up and twirl, chewed by time in their teeth, crushing the empires, fractured perfections. Time owns dust. It shapes the earth in clay and leaves us the myths of divine creation. They're so mundane. Dust is, after all, earth, and earth is at the beginning. Dust is our great ancestor. Rather than effacing, it draws new footprints of who we are, who we were, what we are, and will be again. From the sand that we sprouted from, we have whirlwinds coming up from the ground, and we will return to the sand, to the dust again, and always, and again. Great.
And
May I say, I would just like to thank the interpreters that have done wonderful work interpreting simultaneously for those who do not know me. So thank you, the festival, for having invited me, and all the Brazilian curators, and for my readers in Brazil, my publishing houses. So thank you so much for being here.